And it's not just some vague promise. This act is retroactive to January 2024, right? So anyone who had their benefits reduced since then will be eligible for a catch-up payment. So imagine someone who's been receiving a lower benefit because of WEP for years. Now they're not only going to get a higher monthly check, but they're also going to get this lump sum payment to make up for the difference.
All right, so hot off the presses. Signed into law, it's the Social Security Fairness Act. And today we're going deep, deep, deep to figure out exactly what it means and, more importantly, how it might affect you. We're going to be looking at a great article from kitses.com. It's called Social Security Fairness Act, Planning Considerations for the Repeal of the Windfall Elimination Provision. That's WEEP for short. And Government Pension Offset, or GPO. And I am so excited to dive into the wild world of Social Security.
I think it's great that these are getting a lot of attention right now because so many people are affected by these changes, and Social Security in general can be confusing, right? So it's really important to understand how this is all going to shake out, especially when we're talking about planning for retirement, right?
Absolutely. And I'm sure that a lot of our listeners are hearing WEP, they're hearing GPO, and they're thinking, what is that? Why should I care?
Yeah.
So before we even get into the act itself, can you give us a super quick refresher on how Social Security benefits are calculated in the first place?
Absolutely. So think of your Social Security benefit like a recipe, right? The main ingredient is your averaged index monthly earnings, or your AIME, right? AME. And basically what that is, it's the average of your 35 highest earnings years adjusted for inflation. So the higher that your AIME is, the higher your benefit's going to be.
So if you're someone who has consistently earned a good income, you're going to have a higher aim than someone who's maybe had a little bit more of a roller coaster career.
Exactly. And then the AIM gets plugged into a formula, right? That spits out your primary insurance amount, or what we call PIA. And that's essentially what you can expect to receive every month at your full retirement age, your FRA, right? Now, the system is designed to be progressive, meaning that lower earners get a larger percentage of their pre-retirement income replaced by Social Security.
Makes sense. So where do the WEP and the GPO fit into all of this? Are they like messing with that formula somehow?
They were, and for a very specific group of people, right? So the WEP and the GPO were created to address a concern, right, about what they call double dipping. And this applied to people who worked in jobs that weren't covered by Social Security, right? Like teachers, police officers, firefighters. These folks often have pensions from their careers, and they also qualify for Social Security benefits based on any other work that they did in their covered jobs, right? The average teacher or firefighter has worked some other job where they had Social Security covered employment. So the WEP and the GPO were aimed at reducing their benefits to kind of account for the perceived advantage, right?
So it sounds like if you had a pension from one of these non-covered jobs, your Social Security benefits would take a hit.
That's right. The WEP, which stands for Windfall Elimination Provision, reduced the PIA for these individuals. So it made it look like they had lower lifetime earnings than they actually did, right? Because it didn't fully account for their non-covered work years. So imagine two people with the exact same earnings history. One worked only in covered jobs. The other had some non-covered years. Well, the one with non-covered work would end up with a lower benefit because of the WEP, right? The WEP, even though their actual income was the same.
So that seems a little unfair. Was that the only impact, or was there anything else besides just like reducing that primary benefit?
Yeah. So the GPO, or the government pension offset, that targeted spousal and survivor benefits. So let's say that someone worked as a teacher and earned a pension, and their spouse worked in a covered job and qualified for Social Security, right? Typically, that non working spouse could receive a benefit based on their partner's work record, right? Yeah, but the GPO could reduce drastically or even completely wipe out that spousal benefit.
Wow. Talk about a slap in the face if you've dedicated your career to public service. Is that why there's so much pushback against those provisions?
Yeah, I think it was a big part of it. Many people felt that the WEP and the GPO unfairly penalized them, right? These individuals who, often work in these demanding essential jobs. I've been working with professors and teachers for 20 years now. It was a sense that they were being punished for having a pension, even though they were still paying into Social Security during any covered employment that they had.
So then what were some of the arguments that were made for keeping the WEP and GPO in place? Like, I'm assuming there has to be some justification, right?
Right. So the main argument that it was a matter of fairness to everyone else paying into Social Security, right? So critics argued that allowing these individuals to receive full benefits from both a pension and Social Security, it created this unfair advantage. A windfall, as some people called it, and they were concerned about the strain that that could put on our system, right?
Right. Okay, so valid points on both sides. Seems like this was a pretty heated debate. So where does the Social Security Fairness Act actually come in? Does this new law completely overturn the WEP and GPO?
It does. It fully repeals both the WEP and the GPO, right? So it eliminates them entirely. And this means that folks who were previously subject to reductions will now see an increase in their benefits. That's huge, right? And some may even be eligible for retroactive payments.
Retroactive payments, you mean like a lump sum of money to make up for all those benefits that they missed out on because of the WEP and GPO?
Exactly. And it's not just some vague promise. This act is retroactive to January 2024, right? So anyone who had their benefits reduced since then will be eligible for a catch-up payment. So imagine someone who's been receiving a lower benefit because of WEP for years. Now they're not only going to get a higher monthly check, but they're also going to get this lump sum payment to make up for the difference.
Wow. That is huge. A lot of people, I'm sure, are breathing a huge sigh of relief, maybe even a little excited. But I do have to ask, if we're increasing benefits for, a large group of people, what does
Yeah.
that mean for the overall health of Social Security? Are we just kicking the can down the road, creating a bigger problem later on?
That's a very important question, and it's definitely one that we're going to dig into in just a moment. While this act addresses a real fairness issue, right, it does also raise some concerns about the long term solvency of Social Security.
All right.
Yeah.
So maybe not quite a fairy tale ending, but before we get into, potential downsides or anything like that, let's just talk about the immediate impact of this act. What should people be doing right now to make sure they're benefiting from these changes?
Yeah, the first step is to check your Social Security statement online. You can access that through the Social Security Administration's website. It's going to give you a personalized projection of your future benefits. And the good news is that these statements are already being updated to reflect the repeal of WEP.
Oh, wow. So if you have been subject to the WEP, you can just log in and you can see how much your benefits have increased.
Exactly. It'll give you a much clearer picture of what to expect
Right.
without the WEP holding you back. And for those folks who were impacted by the GPO, you're going to want to consider filing for spousal benefits, as you may now be eligible for a higher payout without the GPO reduction. So it's a whole new way to look at spousal Social Security coordination.
Okay, so two things. Check your statement, consider spousal benefits. What else? What else should people be keeping in mind as they kind of navigate this new landscape?
Yeah, well, if your spouse is already receiving Social Security benefits, you might want to explore if switching to spousal benefits would be advantageous for you. Now the GPO is gone, this could be potentially result in a higher monthly payout.
So it sounds like there are some real opportunities here for people to really maximize their benefits. I am curious, though, are there any potential downsides to all of this?
That's a great question, and one we're going to be digging into a bit more deeply. But while this is undoubtedly good news for many, we also need to consider the broader implications for future Social Security itself.
All right, a little cliffhanger there. Stay tuned, folks, because when we come back, we are going to be tackling the big question. What does all this mean for the long-term sustainability of Social Security? And what can you do to prepare for any potential changes down the road? Okay, so we've laid out, kind of the basics of the Social Security Fairness Act. And it sounds like a lot of people stand to benefit from the repeal of the WEP and GPO. But now I'm kind of curious about the bigger picture, the long-term impact on Social Security. You mentioned earlier, this is kind of like a double-edged sword.
Yeah, it is. It's important to remember that Social Security isn't just this bottomless pit of money. The way it works is that it uses current workers' payroll taxes to pay benefits to current retirees. So it's this balancing act, right? right? That depends on a lot of factors like birth rates, life expectancy, and the overall health of the economy.
Right. And so this act essentially throws another variable into the mix by, increasing the amount of money flowing out to beneficiaries.
Exactly. In fact, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that the Social Security Fairness Act will add billions of dollars to the program's cost over the next decade. And this is a time when Social Security is already facing some financial headwinds. I mean, the trust fund is projected to be depleted within the next 15 years or so, which means that without any changes, benefits could be cut across the board.
So while this act is definitely, a win for fairness and equity, it also kind of adds to the urgency of finding solutions to, shore up Social Security for the long haul.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it. It really highlights the need for a broader conversation about how to ensure the program's sustainability going forward, right? We really need to think about, how to balance the need of current and future retirees with the realities of, any of our changing demographics and economic landscape.
Okay, so before we even get into like potential solutions or anything, can you paint a picture for us of what might happen if we just do nothing? Like, what does a future with a depleted Social Security trust fund actually look like?
Well, the most likely scenario is that benefits would have to be reduced. And this would mean across the board cuts, or it could involve more like targeted adjustments like raising the retirement age or changing the way benefits are calculated.
So not necessarily a doomsday scenario, but it could mean that, future retirees receive less than they're currently expecting.
Exactly. And that's why, it's so important to have these conversations now rather than waiting until we're, in a crisis situation.
All right, so let's talk solutions. What are some of the options that have been floated to address Social Security's financial challenges?
Well, there are a few main approaches. One is to increase revenue, which could involve, raising payroll taxes or increasing the income cap that's subject to Social Security taxes, or even finding new sources of funding.
So basically, bring in more money to cover the costs.
Right. Another approach is to reduce spending. And this could mean, cutting benefits, raising the retirement age, or even making changes to the benefit formula itself.
And of course, there's always the option of doing a combination of both, increasing revenue and reducing spending.
Exactly. There's no like easy answer, right? And each of these approaches has its own set of pros and cons, right?
It sounds like, finding a solution that balances the needs of all stakeholders is going to be tricky.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, but the good news is that there are a lot of smart people working on this issue, and there's a range of options on the table.
Okay, so for those listening who are probably thinking, all right, this is all well and good, but what does this mean for me? Like, what's the best way to prepare for any potential changes down the road?
Well, I think the most important thing is just stay informed. Keep an eye on the news, follow organizations like the RSSA, the Senior Citizens League. They're the group that's out there that gives us that cost of living adjustment report every year. And, reach out to your elected officials to let them know your thoughts and your concerns.
So be an active participant in the process rather than just a passive observer.
Exactly. The future of Social Security is ultimately in the hands of the American people. And, the more engaged we are, the better the chances of finding a solution that works for everyone.
I love that. And I would also add that, it's crucial to have a solid financial plan in place. Social Security was never intended to be the sole source of income in retirement.
Absolutely. Having a diversified retirement portfolio,
Hmm.
including savings, investments, and potentially, other sources of income can help really provide a buffer against any future changes to Social Security.
So even though we can't predict exactly what the future holds, we can take steps to be prepared.
Exactly. And while it might seem daunting, remember that you don't have to go at it alone, right? There's resources available, including financial advisors like myself who specialize in retirement planning, who can, really help you navigate these complexities and create a plan that aligns with your goals.
That's a great point. Always good to have a trusted guide in your corner.
Absolutely. Now, we've been focused on the kind of the big picture implications of the Social Security Fairness Act, but I think it might be helpful to zoom back in on some specific scenarios that really illustrate how the repeal of WEP and GPO might play out in real life.
Yeah, let's get granular. Let's see how this actually impacts, individuals on a personal level.
Right. So imagine a scenario where someone worked as a teacher for 25 years. They earned a pension and then they switched to a job covered by Social Security for the remaining 10 years of their career. Now, before the Social Security Fairness Act, those 25 years of non covered earnings, they would have been treated as like zero income when calculating their AIME, right? So it was dragging down their overall benefit amount.
Right. It's like those 25 years of hard work were just being ignored.
Exactly. But now with the WEP gone, those 25 years are finally given their due. So their benefits will be calculated based on their actual earnings over their entire 35-year work history.
So it's a much more accurate reflection of their, lifetime contributions.
Exactly. Now, let's look at a situation involving GPO. Let's say you have a couple where one of the spouse worked as a firefighter for most of their career and they're now receiving a pension. Their spouse, on the other hand, worked in a covered job and is eligible for Social Security benefit
So before the act, the spouse who worked as a firefighter would have seen their spousal benefits reduced, potentially, even wiped out.
by the GPO.
Exactly. But now, with the GPO gone, they're going to receive their full spousal benefit without any penalty. It's a game changer for couples in that situation.
Wow. Okay. So we're seeing these like tangible benefits for, individuals who were previously penalized by these provisions. I'm curious though about the retroactive payments. How exactly is that going to work? Is someone or everyone who's affected just going to get like a big check in the mail?
Well, the Social Security Administration is still working out the logistics. But what we do know is that anyone who had their benefits reduced due to the WEP or GPO since January 2024 will be eligible for a lump sum payment.
So it's a waiting game for now. Essentially, yes, but I'd say keep an eye out for updates from the Social Security Administration. They'll be providing more information as soon as it becomes available.
Okay, so stay tuned. This all sounds pretty complex. Is there like a simple way for people to figure out if they need to take action right now?
Yeah, I mean, the best advice I can give you right now is that if you think you might be affected by these changes, reach out to the Social Security Administration directly. You can review your specific situation through the Social Security Department. I have clients that I've worked with for years that we're going to have to go back because the situation has changed and re-optimize for individuals and couples on their GPO web to get a really good idea of what the rest of their lives are with their new income.
That's a great reminder. It's always best to go straight to the source. Now, as we're wrapping up this part of our deep dive, it strikes me that this whole situation with the Social Security Fairness Act, it really highlights how, policies can evolve over time to better reflect the needs of, the people they're supposed to serve.
I can agree more. The repeal of the WEP and the GPO is a testament of the power of advocacy and, the importance of constantly reevaluating our systems to ensure fairness and equity.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that we all have a voice in this process, and engaging with our elected officials and participating in these conversations is really crucial for, shaping a future where Social Security continues to provide a safety net for, generations to come.
Yeah, well said. And that brings us to a final crucial point about the act that we need to discuss. We talked about the immediate impact and, the broader implications for Social Security's future, but there's one more layer to this conversation.
I'm intrigued. What haven't we covered yet? Okay, so what's this other layer? What haven't we talked about?
We talked about the positive impact on individuals and the potential challenges for Social Security's long-term funding, but there's also a political dimension to consider. This act didn't just materialize out of thin air. It's a reflection of shifting political priorities and a growing awareness of the need to address the concerns of public servants.
Right, so this is about more than just numbers and formulas. We're talking about like the values that we as a society place on, different types of work and the commitments that we make to those who serve our communities.
Exactly. The passage of this act, it suggests a growing recognition that the previous rules were unfair to a significant group of people who, dedicated their careers to public service. It raises questions about how we even define fairness when it comes to social safety net programs like Social Security.
Yeah, I mean, if we value the work of teachers, police officers, firefighters,
Yeah.
all these public servants, shouldn't our policies reflect that? Shouldn't we make sure that they're not penalized for choosing, these vital professions?
I think the Social Security Fairness Act is a step towards aligning our policies with our values, but it also raises questions about how well balanced these values can be with the need to ensure long term sustainability of Social Security.
Right? Because as we talked about earlier, this act does, add to the program's financial challenges. So how do we reconcile these competing priorities? How do we ensure fairness for public servants while also, safeguarding Social Security for future generations?
That's really the $1 million question. It's one that's going to require careful consideration, thoughtful debate. There's no easy answer here, but I think the act has certainly brought these issues to the forefront of the political conversation.
So it's a bit of a wake-up call, right? Prompting us to have some tough conversations about our priorities and, how we want to shape the future of Social Security.
Exactly. And this is where you, our listeners, come in. You have a voice in this process, engaging your elected officials. Thanks for expressing your views, participating in the public discourse. These things can help shape the direction of our Social Security policy.
That's such an important reminder. We can't just, sit back and wait for someone else to fix this. We all have a stake in the future of Social Security.
Absolutely. The choices that we make today are going to have a profound impact on the retirement security of generations to come.
All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today in this deep dive. We've explored the intricacies of the Social Security Fairness Act, its potential impact on, individuals and the system as a whole, and even, delved into the political considerations. So as we wrap up, what are the key takeaways you want our listeners to walk away with?
I think first and foremost, if you think you might benefit from the Social Security Fairness Act, take action. Check your statement online, consider filing for spousal benefits, and reach out to the Social Security Administration if you have any questions, right? You don't want to leave money on the table.
Don't miss out on what you're entitled to.
And second, stay informed. This is an evolving issue, and the choices that we make in the coming years are going to have lasting impact. So keep up with the news, follow organizations that are tracking these developments, and let your elected officials know what you think.
Be an active participant in, shaping the future of Social Security.
And finally, remember that Social Security is just one piece of that retirement puzzle, right? Having a diversified financial plan, including savings, investments, healthcare expenses in retirement, estate planning, other sources of income can really help ensure a secure and comfortable retirement.
So much food for thought. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the Social Security Fairness Act. I know I learned a lot, and I'm sure our listeners did too.
Been my pleasure. These are great questions for complex issues, but I believe that through open dialogue and informed decision making, we can find solutions that ensure the well-being of both current and future retirees.
And remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about Social Security, the better equipped we'll be to, advocate for ourselves and for the future of this vital program. So thank you for joining us for this deep dive, and we'll see you next time.